Hello, everyone. This is part 2 of week 11 of Plato, a class on the Protagoras, Phaedo, and Sophist. And we finally talked about the presumably biggest question of the Sophist: what is falsity? And I want to offer a kind of minimal 3-step account. Now, here are 2 examples. Theaetetus is flying, is false, assuming we are sitting around with Theaetetus talking philosophy. The cat is gray is false if my cat is orange. Now, what is the account of the falsity of these predications in the Sophist? The first step we've already seen, namely that we can account for not being in terms of difference. Why is that important? The interlocutors started out with the mistaken assumption that not being, when something is not something, it is the opposite of that which it is. And in the case of not being, that would mean that it is nothing. And that is this, incomprehensible non-entity where it is unclear how we can even think about it and talk about it. But if we account for not being in terms of what is different from what is, the puzzle of how we can think about it and talk about it goes away. The second step is to think about different uses of the verb to be or is. And that is a major theme in the literature of the Sophist. Scholars tend to think that we should distinguish 2 uses. One is called existential, the other is called predicative. So suppose you say the cat exists or the cat is, that is the existential way of using the verb to be. If you say the cat is gray, that is the predicative use of the verb to be. You're predicating gray of the cat. And you might think that the existential understanding of being or the verb to be is what is the problem in thinking of not being as nothing. Because if you think that not to be needs to be read in this existential sense, then you are concerned with this perplexing non-entity where it is unclear how we can think about it and talk about it. But here's the other use of the verb to be, where things are just not puzzling. We can plausibly say, and we say all the time, things like the cat is not gray, it is orange. And that is the predicative use of is, and the predicative use then of is not. So the third step is to finally turn to falsity. And, recall that is in some sense our big issue, because we have described the Sophist as someone who generates falsehoods, and that has seemed incomprehensible. However, once the Iliadic stranger and Theaetetus get to the idea of false speech, the Iliadic stranger says, hold up. Before we turn to false speech, we need to say what speech is. And that is another big issue and another claim to fame for the dialogue. So what is speech? The claim is, or the proposal is, that the smallest unit in speech is something like Theaetetus is sitting, or Theaetetus is flying, or the cat is gray. Importantly, the proposal is not the kind of idea that to us is more familiar, that in philosophy of language, we are dealing with propositions. Rather, something like Theaetetus is sitting is considered a composite. We are saying about Theaetetus that he is sitting. We are predicating something of Theaetetus. So there are these 2 components. Now, false speech, then, on this way of thinking about speech, is going to be, for example, in the case of Theaetetus is flying, that we predicate of Theaetetus something that is different from everything that is the case about him. We say of Theaetetus flying, or we say that he is flying off Theaetetus. And that is different from anything that actually is about Theaetetus. And that is the analysis of false speech that the dialogue offers. And so we have kind of reached a conclusion of this complicated middle section of the dialogue, and we can return to defining the sophist.